What's up, everybody? I'm Sean Jones. It's good to be here. Happy International Jazz Day. And we're just going to have a little listening party here. It's very informal. We're just going to have some fun. Shout out to Jerry's Records in Pittsburgh, which is one of the places that I've gotten a fair amount of vinyl with some help from a good friend of mine. His name is Thomas Wint. He's a very avid record collector, and I've just sort of started scratching the surface myself. Again, we're going to do some listening here of some of my favorite albums, some things that you may have heard before, some artists that you may have heard of before, and some things that you may not have. So we're going to start right away with an album that I actually just picked up a little while ago. This is George Cable's album, okay? And the album is called Cablevision. And some of the folks that are on the record, we have George Cable's, of course. He's playing electric piano and acoustic piano. Then there's Freddie Hubbard, which is actually one of the reasons I picked up the record. Ernie Watts is on this record playing soprano saxophone and tenor saxophone. There's Bobby Hutcherson on vibes. Tony Dumas on electric bass, and Peter Erskine on drums. All right. Now I'm going to be playing this music from my record player, which is right next to me. You can see in the background over here a little print of a trumpet player playing inside of with a boom box. That's what we used to call them back in the day. Or ghetto blasters, whatever you want to call them. But I'm going to play this. And this is the first track on George Cable's Cablevision record. It's called Morning Song. Let's check it out. Gotta get the arm right. Here we go. Again, this is George Cable's Cablevision. The track is called Morning Song. This was recorded December 17th and 18th, 1979 in Hollywood. On this, they play the melody quite frequently. It isn't about the solos until the very end, which is something that I've actually tried to do on one of my albums, a particular album, Kaleidoscope, with a tune called Allison. We play the melody statement for about 5 minutes straight. And then we go ahead and we start playing some solos. Okay. So that's kind of where I got that. Now for the folks that actually want to hear what they're doing, playing some, straight ahead jazz, we're going to put on Bird Like, which is on the same record. So check this out. Check out Freddie Hubbard's playing on this. Ridiculous. It's George. But just for the sake of time, I'll stop it there. You might know that tune, Bird Like, from another one of Freddie Hubbard's records, Ready for Freddie. He played it several times in his career, obviously, but that's one of the rare gems. And so now I just want to take some questions. I got my man Jesse on here, and I think we have some questions queued up.
Hey, Sean, that was burning. Yeah, for the live audience, I'm going to be posting links to, the proper available albums if they exist. So please check the feed if you want to find any of this stuff on Spotify or Apple Music. We'll keep that coming in the stream. And if you register for this event at the link in the description, we'll send out Sean's listening list to you after this session is over. So let's get to the questions. I'll give you a softball, or maybe not so soft. What artists were you inspired by?
Wow. Well, I'm not just inspired by jazz musicians. I'm inspired by a ton of different artists. I grew up in the church, so a lot of gospel music inspires me. The Winans, Kim Burrell, Shirley Caesar, Rance Allen, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, a lot of those cats. But as I started getting more into jazz, or being more jazz specific, the first influence was Miles Davis when I was in elementary school. And then I started just checking out Miles's records and who was playing with Miles. And I started to kind of just go down a rabbit hole, John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, all those cats. But then when I got to high school, I was introduced to the music of Freddie Hubbard. So it was Freddie Hubbard. Then after that, somebody said, well, if you're checking out Freddie Hubbard, you should check out Clifford Brown. So I started checking out Clifford Brown. Then somebody said, well, you know, that stuff is cool. Freddie and Clifford are cool, but you should also start to check out this guy, Woody Shaw. I'm like, Woody Shaw? It's a weird name. So I started checking out the music of Woody Shaw, and that's when I kind of came up with my jazz trumpet holy trinity, which is Freddie Hubbard, Woody Shaw, and Clifford Brown. If I could take all of them and put them in a funnel and then have all of them just kind of meld into one player, and then you sprinkle some gospel on top of it, I would say that that's me.
All right. So what about those players specifically? You know, are there certain improvisational techniques or approach to playing or to their group or to writing from each of those cats that, you know, when you say put it in a funnel, perhaps there are some specific things from each of those cats' bags that you hear that you want to have in your own sound?
Oh, for sure. With Clifford Brown, it's articulation and the joy in his sound, just that vibrancy. For Freddie Hubbard, it's just kind of like his aggressive nature of the time, just kind of pile driving through it. Also, just some of his lines, like they're pretty fluid and they're lengthy, and so I try to do that. With Woody Shaw, it's basically his concept of time over the meter of three, or triple meter. I think that a lot of people look at Woody Shaw's contribution to the music in terms of his lines and the structure, and that they're wide, they're fourths, things like that. That's intriguing, yes, but I think what's more intriguing about Woody Shaw is how he contracts time to sort of fit inside of a 5-to-1 harmonic structure. So when you're on a 5 chord, or you're in a really tense harmonic mood and you know it's going to shift to something that's more relaxing, he makes sure that you feel it rhythmically as well as harmonically. So I really enjoy that about Woody.
All right, so one more follow-up. How did you take all of that interest and all the things you were hearing that you were digesting as a young man, as a young player, as a listener? How did you turn that into your vocabulary? Was it transcription? What was just your natural approach to trying to acquire some of those things that you were hearing?
Well, I'll say this. Most people don't create a language. Like, who's going to create French? Who's going to create the English language? Right?
The people.
Yeah, the people create it. And also maybe, in certain instances, there's a genius that comes along, like a Charlie Parker or someone like that creates a way of using harmonic melodic expression that is so unique that it becomes a way of projecting that language or that information. Most people aren't going to do that. That's just what it is. If you had that in the world, then things would change every 5 seconds, and there would be no style that would click, that would stick. It would just be moving on from style to style. So that being said, I think that anybody that internalizes a certain amount of information and exudes that information in a concise manner, in an authentic manner, as authentic as they can make it, and it's clear over their own medium, then they have their own sound. Like, I didn't invent the English language, but if you hear me speak, you know it's Sean. And the reason that you know it's Sean is because I have a way of speaking. And that's based on my upbringing, it's based on my background, it's based on the amount of information that I've digested, and my ability to communicate it. So I think that's what I've been able to do over time. I spent a lot of time digesting all of these records. You know, got so many. We're not going to get to all of them. There are several hundred records around me right now. I've digested that information, made it my own, began to speak that information, decided how I want to speak it, and then I'm not afraid to speak it. And I think that once people are able to get to that level, then they're able to exude who they are. They're able to be who they are, and that's important.
You want to hit another tune?
That doesn't make me a genius, though. Like, that's not a genius thing to do. I actually think that's your responsibility as an artist. That's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to take everything that has come before you, humbly digest it, realize that you're nothing without it, and then project it in your way in this time for right now, because that's your job. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. And if you're a genius, God bless you. We need more of you.
Hey, so before we get to one more tune, another tune, I got a follow-up question from Mike Coburn about something you just said. So he asks, at what point do you consider that you've digested a record fully?
That's a good question. I don't think you ever truly really digest a record fully, because you're constantly changing as a person. Your ability to hear is constantly changing. Like, I can put on something that I transcribed when I was in 10th grade. The first transcription I ever did was Freddie Hubbard's Hub Tone solo on the Hub Tones record. And I can go back to that now and hear something that I didn't hear. You never fully digest. It's just, that's like saying, when do you really ever truly comprehend the ability of salt? You can't. Like, salt, I mean, excuse me, it's impossible. And so I think you can reach a level where you say, okay, I can sing all the solos. I know all the rhythms. I know what they're comping here versus what they're playing on the snare drum here. But that's not digesting the record. Like, there's a spiritual thing that happens when you listen to music, like that vibration. And that vibration that hits your ear changes based on who you are as a person at that time. Like, I'm changing now. I mean, quarantine has me, it has me going through a level of transformation that I wasn't expecting, you know? So when I put on music right now, I'm listening to it with a fresh set of ears, because my vibration is changing. I have a daughter now. I got a wife now. I got, I have all of these things. So my appreciation of the world and what music is not the same as it was 4 years ago or 14 years ago. I'm listening to it with those ears, hearing Freddie Hubbard play this and then hearing my daughter cry in the background. I never heard that before. So you never learn it. You never learn it. You just keep going down the rabbit hole,
All right, you want to go down a little deeper into the rabbit hole?
Yes, let's go down into the rabbit hole. Okay, so I'm going to play something here. One of my favorite artists, and this is sort of a loose tribute to a gentleman that just passed away recently, Andy Gonzalez, one of the great bassists of our time. He was one of the founders of Fort Apache, and we don't have either one of those cats here anymore, Andy or Jerry Gonzalez. May they rest in peace. But this is an album that I actually started really diving into with my wife and my daughter, who's over there. You'll see him in a second. But this is a record called Harlem River Drive. You may have heard it. It's one of my favorite albums. It's groundbreaking. I love this album because Eddie basically stood up to all of the cats that were traditionalists. And they were saying, like, oh no, this is you got to play with this version of the clave. It's got to be this. This is what it is. And he basically was like, no. And he took a lot of ostracism for that. But with this record, you hear his influence from Afro-Latin jazz, that influence combined with R&B music. So I'm going to play one of the tunes from this. It's actually one of my favorite tunes on here. It's called If We Had Peace Today, and it's very appropriate. So I want you to check that out real quick. It's hard to see in the daylight. Harlem River Drive.
Barrels of laughter, barrels of joy. Oh, what a great world it would be, and we would all be free for people like you and me. Oh,
Yeah, so you can hear that. For sake of time, I'm skipping through a lot of stuff. So that's an amazing record. A lot of people that know Eddie Palmieri, especially cats that are like one singular lane about him, would not even know that he has a body of work that has that. Now, my favorite track on this album, Harlem River Drive, is a tune called Idle Hands. And there's an amazing Barry solo on it by a cat named Ronnie Kubert. He's ridiculous, ridiculous. Ronnie's a wild cat. I got a chance to play with him in the Mingus band a little bit. But check this track out. I'm just going to play a little bit of it. Idle Hands. On this, you can hear the bass still keeping that sort of Afro-Latin influence. Ding, down. You can hear that mixed with R&B. You got the cowbell in there, certain rhythms. Diggity, da-ga-da.
you all know the story. How it all began. It took 5 days, and then came back. Oh, the land was free, and so were we. No slavery, dirty poverty. I love
So you hear all those influences there? You hear R&B. You hear the Afro-Latin influence, all the horns. Pow, 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 right? Yeah. Right there. Yeah, I'll stop it right there. That tune is about 8 minutes long, so I'm not gonna play the whole thing. But Ronnie Kubert, if you're a Barry sax player out there, Ronnie Kubert takes an amazing Barry solo on that. And the whole record is just really, really, really phenomenal. There's another Eddie Palmieri record that you should check out. I'm not gonna play it so I can get to some other stuff, but it's known as the White Album. Okay, this is a really groundbreaking album. Here, it's pretty hard to find on vinyl nowadays, like a good copy of it. But you can find most of this stuff on like iTunes or on the internet if you want to check it out. Okay, Should we go back? Should we listen to some more, Jesse, or should we take some more questions? Let's take some more questions. Oops, can't hear you.
All right, I'm back. Thanks, Sean. I put links to both records, including the Eddie Palmieri one, in the chat here if people want to check those out. But yeah, let's jump into let's do a couple easy ones. How old were you when you started playing?
10 years old.
And were you always?
But that was not the beginning of my musical journey. I started singing in church before that, and I tried to play drums a little bit before that. When you grow up in a Pentecostal church, like singing and playing is just what you do. In fact, there was like 2 or 3 kids that couldn't really sing when we were growing up. We actually thought something was wrong with them. That's just what you did.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's some questions that come over about like music education. Here's one specifically. It's with jazz education focused essentially on a younger generation. What tips and encouragement can you offer people who got into music later in life or want to be better musicians? And maybe you could talk a little bit about that in the context of what you just said, insofar as the music education that you had, like you were mentioning before you started playing the trumpet, was part of your family, was part of your culture, was part of your church.
Honestly, it's not just a music thing. It's not just an instrument thing. We all I won't say we all, but I can speak for myself, is that, being a 41-year-old man now, there are certain things that I've avoided for my entire life. Like certain things that I've been curious about, certain things I want to dive deeper into that just never did, because it was, I got music, or I got this, or I got the other thing. And I think it's like, once you make the decision to truly dive into those things, you have to do it almost like you're a child. Like you don't know anything. You're green. You have no idea what's going on, but you have to be relentlessly hopeful like a child is. Like they're not inhibited by not knowing. They're not intimidated by their lack of knowledge of a thing. The only thing they do is they say, oh, look at that. And they go run toward it and try to figure it out. And I think that's what you got to do. If you're coming at this later in your life, really dive deeply into it. Reckless abandon. There is no where to start. Like a lot of people ask me all the time, where do you start if you want to get into it? You start at your beginning, and everybody's beginning is different. And so go with that thing that you're gravitating towards. It's like that little carrot that's like, whoa, what is that? And really start listening to it over and over again, getting it in your ears. Whether you're 5 years old, 15 years old, 75 years old, you still got to approach it with the same humility. You got to approach it with the same excitement. You have to approach it with the same diligence. And you have to approach it with the same patience. Doesn't matter how old you are. So I would say, listen as much as you can. Really hone in on the basics. If you're getting into an instrument, like a trumpet or something like that, live with the basics, live with the fundamentals, and just keep going. Realizing that it's not going to be something that you learn, like it's a recipe out of a cookbook. It's going to be something that it's going to be a rabbit hole that's continuous.
So am I correct in saying then that for you, perhaps learning is about the process of discovery?
Yes, learning is about the process of discovery. It's about humility. It's about so many different things. It's about being human. It's about your connection to something that you don't know about, that you have no awareness of at all. And the only way to do that is you have to succumb to it. You have to become it. Like in order for me to play jazz and play this music the way I have to get out of the way. Like I have to go into it in order for it to happen. It's not this thing where it's like, I'm going to play or I'm going to do this. No, because the music will just laugh at you. It's like, really? You need me. I don't need you. And that's with anything in life. If you want to go into that lane and you want to discover more about yourself or or get better at a certain thing, you have to humble yourself and realize that thing, it's an honor to be in the presence of that thing or to even discover it. And if you come at it with like that, then maybe you can get a piece of what that thing is.
Great advice. So what keeps you motivated when you're learning or you're discovering, but you feel discouraged?
What keeps me motivated, it's changed over the years, you know. For a long time, it was the music itself, because the music itself was an escape for me. You know, when I was growing up, I believe it or not, I was a very shy kid. And I was very shy because of my circumstances, you know, dealing with a lot of stuff. Your father was gone, a lot of stuff like that. And so that trumpet became a place for me to hide. And so I started practicing and practicing and practicing. And I got better and better and better at it. And so the music, in essence, saved me, quote unquote, saved me from having to deal with all of that other stuff that was so hard for me to even fathom. But now that I'm, you know, 41 years old, 42 next month, and I have a family, I have a daughter, 2 daughters, you know, and a wife, it's no longer that anymore. It's like now, it's like I'm doing stuff for them. It's like I'm living for that, and I'm learning how to live for that because I've never been here before, you know? So it's like my life is now like no longer about me. So my music making is informed by the life that I'm now leading. And I think that it you know, over your progression as a human being, your purposes change at different points. You know, at 20 years, it was, you know, I'm not going to lie. I would be lying if I didn't say it was, oh, it's fun just playing and being out there and it's just me. But now it's different. So I hear differently now. I think, you know, things are changing around me. So I would say for anybody that's looking for motivation, try to look for the motivation outside of yourself. You know, try to figure out why do this at all? What am I connected to? How is it going to help me? How is it going to help my fellow human being that's next to me? And then the music will be at a higher plane then, hopefully. Yeah.
All right, you want to get back to another tune?
Yeah, let's get
all right.
back
We'll take
to
some more questions after that.
Sure. Let's play something that actually is a Dizzy Gillespie record that most people may not know. You hip to that, Jesse?
Yeah. I don't have it. I wish I did.
Oh, dig it. Yeah. This record is called Sold Out by Dizzy Gillespie. Sold Out. Sold. And so just I'm going to tell you about a couple of the tracks on here. There's a track on here called Pot Liquor. There's a track on here called Turnip Tops, Chicken Giblets, you know, Turkey Fan. I mean, it's just a very soulful album. And a lot of you wouldn't really hear Dizzy come at things this way. But I'm going to play the track Pot Liquor.
Sounds like we're about to have a gospel brunch.
It's you know, it's all, man, all of this music is the same. It's all the same. You know, Nicholas Payton says, you know, he calls it Black American music, you know. It all comes from the same place. It's all blues, it's all soul, it's all those rhythms, and it's uniquely American. It's ours, you know, coming through the lens of certain cultural experiences. And so check this out. It's called Pot Liquor. Hope you enjoy it. right, so you can hear that. That's not something that you typically hear coming out of Dizzy. But
I was going to ask you about that. So, you just talked about Nicholas and using the term Black American music, and then we listened to Ronnie Cuber a second ago on Idle Hands, and if you compare that playing to like the kind of playing he does in the Mingus Big Band, this is different playing. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that there's a lot of misconception out there about there being jazz players that play jazz.
Well, the jazz players that play jazz, they play theory. They're the
best players.
Yeah, they play a lot of theory, and that's not really a lot of music. And to be frank with you, I'm a culprit. Like, I've been one of those people. Like, I'm just going to play. I'm going to get on stage, and I'm going to play this really complex stuff, and it's going to be fulfilling for me, because I've internalized all of this music. I've internalized all of this theory, and I'm going to spit it out there at an audience, and they need to rise to my level of listening and understanding. Well, that's BS. Nobody cares. Okay, after a while, they'll clap like, oh, great achievement. Next, So when we're talking about language in this American music, it's all the same. Like, sometimes, it's funny. It's like Renee and I, every now and then we call it code switching. It's like, in one situation you speak this way because you want to come off as knowing what's up. Like, if I'm in the hood, I'm gonna say, hey, what's up, y'all? Da, 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 da. But if I go into a boardroom, hey, everyone, how's it going? Not the Jazz Education Network boardroom, because that's kind of like being in the hood too. But that's another thing. So you adjust to different circumstances. So I'm not going to play with Jazz and Lincoln Center the same way that I'm going to play in a funk band, or the same way I'm going to play in that. But it's all connected. It's all still, the same language. That's what it is. Make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And did you want to talk a little bit about Dizzy's playing on there? That's where you started.
Yeah, well, Dizzy's playing specifically, he's not playing a lot of bebop lines. Why? Because that just doesn't fit there. He's playing along with the voice. The vocalist is saying, oh yeah. So he's playing stuff like that. Almost like he's a preacher, So he's playing the music that's called for in that moment in time. I mean, we've all been on gigs where, you might hear a funk band and they're grooving, they're doing their thing, and then the soloist comes up and is, okay, is it time for that? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it's important to play the situation that you're in, and I think that if I could attempt to go into Dizzy Gillespie's mind for a minute, is that he just wanted to make sure that he was documented doing just that. Like, that sounds like the Carolinas right there. So he's documented doing that. And the interesting thing is that's not early in his career. This was done in the 70s. So something to think about, All right, I want to get – oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I've got one more question for you here that's kind of relevant to what you were saying. So could you maybe talk about, are there some jazz vocalists who, you mentioned the Dizzy's playing there being inspired and responding to the aesthetic of the vocal on the recording? Are there vocalists that have influenced you? And specifically, a few people out there were asking about Pops and his vocal quality and his playing, but really the question is about vocalists and how you have, if you've brought any of that styling into your playing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I said, I grew up in a church, and the first instrument that I used was my voice. I was singing a lot back there. You see bins in the far corner back there. There's an entire bin of nothing but jazz vocal records. Over here, down here, next to me, there's an entire bin of, couple hundred R&B vocal albums. One of the albums that I wanted to play was something that I just discovered, Esther Phillips, From a Whisper to a Scream. It's an amazing record, super soulful. Some of the jazz vocalists that I'm really drawn to, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, of course. Dinah Washington is a big one. Nat King Cole, Johnny Hartman. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so when I play melodies, I'm trying to get away from the trumpet. Like I don't want to play, I Got It Bad and that ain't good like this. Like I don't want to play it like that, like I'm giving a speech or something. I want you to feel it. She don't treat me sweet and gentle the way she should. Like I'm playing that song because I know the lyrics. That sounds cliche, things that, you've heard people say over and over, oh, you got to learn the melody, you got to know the lyrics, blah, 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 blah. Well, there's a reason for that. That's where all the emotion and the content comes from. If you're not playing from a certain place, then people can't feel it. Notes can be played that aren't felt. And there's a lot of that. We need to get back to only playing notes that can be felt. And then, our message will have a broader expanse. That makes any sense. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. You want to get to another tune?
Yes, I actually want to get to a different album here. And she is nursing over here right now. But I'm going to put the camera on her to talk about it a little bit. She's covered. That's Brene Ali, and that's Phoebe Eileen.
Yeah, congratulations.
And she's going to tell you about this album.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm a tap dancer. And one of my favorite tap dancers of all time is Baby Lawrence. I love Baby Lawrence because he was he was a dancer's dancer, and he was a musician's musician. He played the drums as well, but he was like on this mission to transform the thought process of what tap dancing was. Of course, for those who know the history, tap dancing was the dance of this art form we call jazz. Tap is part of that legacy where you have swing, you got jitterbug, you got Lady Hop, you got tap dance. And for whatever reason, we went through a really dark period, so a lot of people don't want to be associated with it. But he was very committed to making people listen. So this record was called Dance Master. And so, he plays a lot of tunes. There's a couple of tracks on here where it's just him, he tries to pay tribute to like the sound of the sand dancing, buck dance, which is a style of tap. It was called buck dance, but it was very low to the floor. It comes from out of the South, So there's a lot of like really cool interpretations on this record. And you got some pretty, notable artists that, were supporting him and what he had going on. So I guess we should go ahead and play some of it.
Yeah,
but another thing, Baby Lawrence is originally from Baltimore. So it's another shout out to Baltimore, for another contributor of this rich art form. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he's one of my favorites. So I hope y'all enjoy some of this.
All right. So this is pretty unique thing in that most people have probably never heard an album with a tap dancer on it, let alone an album done by a tap dancer. So we're going to play a tune that you all know, or you should know if you don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
This is Ornithology. Okay? So check out his interpretation of ornithology. Oh. Get in the groove. Scrape the floor. Yeah, so that's pretty hip to check out. And I just want to briefly speak about just what my vision is with the Jazz Education Network. We're going beyond the notes, and what I mean by going beyond the notes is that we're going to dive into everything that makes jazz what it is, not just the theory, not just the cool licks, not just the great arrangements, but the culture that's behind what we do. And if we have more of an understanding of the culture and the why, the broader why of what we do and our connection to the world, then we'll be able to reach more people. That involves dance, that involves visual art, that involves culinary experiences, that involves poetry. It involves so many different things, the entire run and gambit of what it means to be a human being. Jazz musicians are more than just what you hear, that really high art form of what you hear. We are also what you smell, we're what you taste, we're what you see, we're all of those experiences. And so that's why I wanted to play this record, Renee and I, so that you can start to understand that. And so with the conference, you're going to see some of that. You'll probably see Renee and her company dancing. So glad you could check that out. We got some more time for some more music?
Yes, we got plenty of time.
Great.
You want to play something else?
Yes.
All right.
I haven't played any big band music yet. One of my biggest influences in big band music, a lot of people think it must be Thad Jones or it must be something like that. I love that music, but one of my biggest influences is a guy by the name of Don Ellis. Don Ellis's music, in my opinion, hasn't really been celebrated enough in terms of what the big band is able to do. when a lot of big bands were folding in the late 60s, 70s, his big band was still popular. And that's because not only did he incorporate some serious odd meter stuff with what he was doing, but he also had a great level of percussion. He was using, different effects on his horn. And it's just a really exciting a band to check out, the Don Ellis Orchestra. And this is one of my favorites of his. This is a record called Autumn, okay? Most people know Live from the Fillmore and all of that, and jazz, and I think it's 23 3/4 time or something like that. But this is an amazing record, Don Ellis Autumn. And I just want to play some of that real quick for you. Check it out. This is called Variations for Trumpet. Scratchy. Actually, sorry, I'm going to play something different. I forgot that this was on this. I'm going to play a tune called Pussy Wiggle Stomp. Pussy Wiggle Stomp. It's pretty amazing.
Folks will know Dave Brubeck put off of that.
Oh, yeah. Dave Brubeck influenced that. Renee just reminded me. That's in 7, so I'm going to go to the close of it because the closing is pretty exciting. We might go over a little bit. I hope that's all right.
You're good.
There it is. Yeah, so I got a little bit of a confession about Don Ellis. When I was growing up, and I first heard his music, in undergrad, and I'm like, man, this is so killing. This is super killing. And so a lot of the traditionalists would say things like, oh man, why are you gonna listen to that rock and roll jazz? That's not jazz. That's not what's happening. That's not real big band. It's not even complex. You need to listen to Duke Ellington. And then I would even hear things from the racial side of things, like, why are you listening to all those white cats in the big band? You know, that's not what it is. And so in my mind, still being impressionable, I was like, okay, maybe that's not good, because some of my mentors are telling me that. Well, I'm here to unequivocally say that that's BS. That is just not where it is, okay? If it's good, it doesn't matter who created it. If it's good, it doesn't matter what it comes from. It's up to you to decide to dive into that, but it's still relevant and it's valid. So Don Ellis's music, in my mind, is like some seriously untapped stuff that needs to be checked out a lot more by a lot of different people. That's just my opinion. So I don't know if we got time for more questions or where we are. I know you said it's an hour. I told you, man, I'm long-winded. So
no, I'll ask you a question just to follow up there, and then let's do another tune. So, you played something just now, the Pussy Wiggle Stomp, that was, a little lesser known. I think that's probably one of the reasons you chose it, and had that very interesting, that 7/8 groove, which it was made to feel very danceable. If that doesn't make you want to dance, then you ain't hooked up right. But there was a question that came over about, is there another perhaps genre or some other music that has had a big influence on you that is perhaps more like, quote, the word was obscure. So I'm thinking maybe, either not jazz or just something that is, something that is near and dear to you that maybe other people don't really know about.
Brazilian music, big time. I was actually on the list of some of the things. I guess we can keep rolling. There's a Brazilian vocalist. We haven't talked about her yet, right? I think I talked about her before we got online.
Yeah, you should put that on.
Yeah, great Brazilian vocalist, Gal Costa. There's a huge influence on me. I actually used to really listen to a lot of Brazilian music when I was in undergrad and was pretty enamored by it. But specifically Gal Costa, because Gal Costa broke a lot of rules. Actually, one of her albums was banned. This is like PG-13 now compared to what's out there now. This is her album, India, and this is the cover. Brazil banned this album because of this cover. Now, nowadays, we're like, oh, that's not that deep. But back then, late 60s, early 70s, they didn't want that to be out there like that. So they banned a lot of her music, and she didn't care. She still figured out a way to put it out. But this particular album is one of my favorites, with the great composer, performer, Caetano Veloso. I might be saying the name wrong. That's the country in me. Forgive me for that. But this is an amazing, amazing, amazing album. The orchestration on it is phenomenal. The flute work, amazing. And so you'll hear some of that right now.
Meu coração não se cansa de ter esperança de um dia ser tudo que quer. Meu coração de criança não é só a lembrança de um vulto feliz de mulher que passou por meu sonho sem dizer adeus e fez dos olhos meus um chorar mais sem fim. Meu coração vagabundo.
Listen to how smooth it is. It's almost like she's speaking to you. She is speaking to you.
Meu coração vagabundo.
The float of the phrase. Commitment all the way to the end.
Meu coração não se cansa de ter esperança de um dia ser tudo o que quer.
The patience and the orchestration.
Não é só a lembrança de um vulto feliz de mulher que passou por meu sonho sem dizer adeus e fez dos olhos meus um chorar mais sem fim. Meu coração vagabundo quer guardar o mundo.
They don't just stop the words. It's like a continuous breath.
Meu coração vagabundo quer guardar o mundo bem.
A flute choir, and Brazilian rhythm section, 2 voices. And, you know, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this now, listening to it, looking out the window, the rain's falling, there's beautiful trees out there, see my wife, my daughter there. That's what listening to music is about. You know, and that's like connecting to all of that. It's like in those moments I feel inspired. In those moments I feel most human. And in those moments I feel most vulnerable. And that's why we do what we do. Now the thing is, can we take what we listen to and all of that information, can we digest that? And can we offer that same experience authentically to the listener when we're on stage or when we're in the studio booth, right? So that's why it's important to listen. It's important to listen, discover the hows, the whys. How are these things coming to fruition, you know? And there's so much more music that we could play, but we got to end it here. Hopefully we could do this again. I want to give a shout out real quick to Ronald Smith and his high school jazz ensemble, Northfield, Mount Hermon. What's up, y'all? Thanks for chiming in. I hope we can do this again very soon. I want to thank Jesse, Kelly, and Sharon for helping to facilitate this. We have exciting things coming up in the future. I just want to offer people a word of encouragement during this time. This is a very difficult time for a lot of us. Don't be afraid to go inside of yourself in this isolation time. Listen to the music, allow it to heal you, and we'll come out better off in the end. Thank y'all so much. And thank Brene and Phoebe for chiming in. Check them out as well. Exciting things on the horizon. Thank you, Jesse.